You know that feeling, right? That little moment that feels like a glitch in the matrix, a super weird coincidence, or a flash of intuition that comes out of nowhere? Well, what if I told you those weren't just random glitches? What if they're actually clues? Clues to how our reality really works? Today, we are diving deep into a seriously mind-bending theory from an applied physicist, a theory that tries to explain literally everything, from the weirdness of quantum mechanics all the way to consciousness itself.
All right, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off and ask the big one right away. Is our entire universe a computer simulation? I know. It sounds like something straight out of a movie. But the thing is, the rules of quantum physics are, well, they're just so bizarre. The fact that tiny particles can be in two places at once until you look at them, that's the kind of stuff that's made some of the smartest people on the planet seriously wonder if we're living inside some kind of advanced program. And thinking about that forces us to face a huge, fundamental question about what reality even is.
So on one hand, you've got the standard view, right? Science 101. Matter is the real deal. Your brain, this squishy, complex machine made of atoms, creates the feeling of you being you, your conscious experience. But then, there's this totally radical idea that just flips that whole script upside down. It says, no, you've got it backwards. Consciousness isn't a product of reality. Consciousness is the source. And the entire physical world we see is just a projection coming from that consciousness. And this is the absolute core idea behind one physicist's incredibly ambitious model of everything.
And that physicist's name is Thomas Campbell. Now, this isn't some fringe thinker. We're talking about a guy with a serious background in experimental nuclear physics who spent decades working for places like NASA. And he took on this monumental task to create what he playfully calls my big theory of everything, or my big toe. The goal? To build a single logical model that finally unites hard science with metaphysics.
Okay, so at the very heart of his theory is something he calls the larger consciousness system, or the LCS for short. The easiest way to think about this, it's like the fundamental operating system for all of reality. It's not a physical thing out there somewhere, it's the absolute source code from which everything, and I mean everything, including our entire physical universe, is generated. It is the master computer, the system that runs the whole show.
So if the LCS is the computer, what's the program it's running? Well, Campbell calls that physical matter reality, or PMR, and that is us. It's our universe, everything we experience. He argues it's basically a virtual reality, a super complex data stream that's being rendered for us by that larger consciousness system. So yeah, the world you're looking at right now, you can think of it as the game world.
And that video game analogy is really the key to unlocking this whole idea. Think about it. In this model, our physical bodies, they're just our avatars. They're what our consciousness uses to move around and interact inside the simulation. And all those laws of physics, gravity, relativity, you name it, that's just the rule set of the game engine, the code that makes the world consistent. And all that stuff we call paranormal, he says it's not supernatural at all. It's more like a bug, a glitch in the code, or maybe a player who's figured out how to access a part of the data stream that's normally off limits.
Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? If this is all some kind of massive multiplayer game, what's the point? What's the objective? I mean, is there even a way to win?
Well, according to Campbell, the objective has nothing to do with racking up points or collecting stuff. He frames the goal in scientific terms. It's all about entropy reduction. Now, in physics, high entropy just means disorder, chaos. But Campbell translates that to consciousness. High entropy for us is stuff like fear, ego, selfishness. So the whole purpose of being here, the point of the game, it's to evolve our consciousness by moving away from that chaos and toward low entropy, toward states of order, connection, which he says manifests as love, cooperation, and just being good to each other.
Okay, that's a beautiful idea, right? But Campbell is a physicist, and he knew that for this theory to be worth anything, it had to be testable. You have to be able to prove it or disprove it. And he argues that if a reality really is a simulation, well, it has to have computational limits, like any computer. And he believes we can actually find the evidence of that game engine at work by pushing the very boundaries of quantum physics with a really clever twist on a famous experiment.
It all comes down to the legendary double-slit experiment. So here's the quick and dirty version. You shoot tiny particles, like electrons, at a wall with two slits in it. If you don't watch them, they act like waves and create this beautiful interference pattern on the screen behind. But, and this is where it gets totally weird, the second you put a detector there to watch which slit each particle goes through, bam!
They stop acting like waves and behave like little billiard balls. The pattern vanishes. Just looking at it changes the result, and it's right at this magical, weird point that Campbell proposes his brilliant twist.
Because he asks the killer question, what's really making the change happen? Is it the physical detector itself, or is it the fact that a conscious observer, a player, has the potential to look at that data? See, his hypothesis is that reality is rendered on demand, just like in a video game. The game engine doesn't render the details of a room you're not in, right? It would be a waste of processing power. Campbell thinks reality works the same way. It won't bother creating a definite outcome that no one is ever going to see.
And that brings us to his actual proposed experiment, what some people call the data trashing test. It's simple, really. You run the double-slit experiment just like before, with detectors recording the which slit information for every particle. But, and this is the absolute crucial step, that data is immediately sent to a storage device, which is then completely destroyed, trashed, before any human being, any consciousness, could possibly have a chance to look at it.
And this is where the rubber meets the road, because it sets up two totally different predictions. Standard quantum mechanics says, look, as soon as the detector makes the measurement, the choice is made. The wave collapses. It doesn't matter if you look at the data or not. You should get a particle pattern, no interference. But Campbell's simulation theory predicts something completely radical. It says if that information is destroyed before a player can ever see it, the system has no reason to render a final result. The particles should go back to being a wave, and that beautiful interference pattern should actually come back.
And get this. This isn't just some wacky thought experiment. This is real. Thanks to crowdfunding and Campbell's nonprofit, these exact experiments are actually happening right now in collaboration with scientists at California State Polytechnic University. And let me be clear, if they run this test and that wave pattern comes back, it would completely upend our entire understanding of physics as we know it.
But Campbell's quest doesn't just stop with quantum physics. He actually founded a nonprofit called CUSAC that stands for the Center for the Unification of Science and Consciousness. And its whole mission is to fund research into other strange phenomena, other things that really push the boundaries of that old-school materialist worldview. Basically, they're hunting for more potential glitches in the matrix.
And some of the projects CUSAC is looking into are, wow, they're really out there in the best way. They're funding research into something called mindsight, which is the idea that some people can see or perceive visual info without using their physical eyes. And they're also teaming up with a video game company to test if a player's focused thought, their intention, can actually influence the random numbers generated by a quantum device inside the game itself.
Now, with the mindsight research, they're being super careful and scientific about it. They're starting small. The first phase is a really tightly controlled, double-blind lab experiment with just 10 people who claim they have this ability. The whole point is to get clean, rock-solid data that's free from any kind of bias.
But that small, careful lab study? That's just step one. They are thinking way, way bigger. The next step is to actually develop a mobile app for mindsight training. This would let them scale the research up from just 10 people in a lab to, well, potentially more than 10,000 people all over the world. Imagine the massive data set they could gather on these fringe, edge-of-consciousness abilities.
Okay, so we've looked at wild quantum experiments and mindsight research. Let's pull back and bring this all back home, back to you and me. If there's even a little bit of truth to Campbell's theory, what does it actually mean for us, for the players in this game day to day?
You know, the whole practical, real-world takeaway from this theory can pretty much be summed up by this quote from Campbell. He says that in this kind of reality, it's not just about what you do. It's about why you do it. The quality of your intention, your motivation behind the action, that's the engine that drives the evolution of your consciousness. So the real question is, are you acting from a place of fear, or are you acting from a place of love?
And that completely reframes the whole purpose of life, doesn't it? It's not some big competition that you have to win. It's more like a single-player game of personal growth that just happens to be played in a multiplayer world. Your main quest is to make choices that lower your own entropy, to move yourself away from the chaos of fear and ego and toward becoming a more loving, more cooperative being. Which really just leaves us with one last thought to chew on. If this reality really is a kind of virtual school, a curriculum designed for our spiritual growth, a game where the only real goal is to evolve the quality of your own consciousness, then the only question that truly matters is, how are you playing?